everybody, Shane Class here with Shane Talks Politics. What I'm about to show you today might disturb you. In fact, it should disturb you. Because what I'm about to show you is how our Idaho governor, Governor Little, has basically joined the liberal mainstream media in what amounts to a smear campaign to discredit a group of concerned Idaho citizens who showed up last Monday at the Idaho Special Legislative Session at the Capitol building, not to protest, as has been pushed out there by the media and our governor, but just to have their voices heard. Under Idaho law, any meeting where the legislature meets, any laws are being written, is open. It has been that way since 1974. It's open to the public, and any of the public can attend. As I'm going to show you, that is not limited by some coronavirus. So this group of people had some concerns about what was being discussed on Monday. They wanted to show up, show their support for a couple things that they wanted to see pushed through, and also to speak, have their voices heard, and show their discontent for some of the laws that were on the table that could have been passed. And they had genuine concerns for that. When they got there, as I'm going to show you, they were met by police. And they were told they can't enter. They can't go in. And rightfully so, that upset this group of people. And they forced their way into the Capitol building. And I applaud them. After watching all of the video, which, by the way, I have video that I'm going to show you that I obtained from sources who wish to remain anonymous because they're fearful of how other people that attended have been treated. They're fearful that the governor or the Idaho State Police, the legislature, may come down on them. And they're afraid. But they feel like this video needed to get out and it needed to be showed. They asked me to do what I'm doing here today and tell the real story. So I'm going to show you some of that video here in a moment. Now, you may have heard some of the articles. You may have seen some of the articles, such as this one from CNN. Maskless armed protesters storm the state capitol building. Unmasked protesters push past police into Idaho Lawmakers session. Or this one from the Idaho Statesman. Unmasked protesters shatter glass door in Idaho Capitol building as special session starts. And that is what happened. But that's not the entire story. Even our governor joined in and said, "You far outnumbered the individuals who infringed on our orderly proceeding. We will always outnumber the agitators who seek to stifle civil debate and harm our democratic republic." I want you to remember those words. Because what I'm about to show you paints an entirely different story than agitators who sought to stifle civil debate and harm the democratic republic. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. And you're about to see that now. This is Shane Talks Politics. Let's just go ahead and dig in. So let's start with some video. I'm going to show you the video. There were dozens and dozens of cell phones being held up. I didn't get a chance to attend. I thought about it, honestly, because I had some concerns about what was going on, but I was unable to get there, and taking 2 or 3 days out of my schedule just wasn't something that I could do. But I'm grateful to the men and women who were there, who were a voice for the rest of Idaho's citizens who have concerns over what's happening with our governor and the power that he has robbed from our legislature and from our citizens through this coronavirus pandemic. And I applaud them for showing up to be that voice. I'm going to start off by showing you video of when they first got there. Because the way that the media has painted this and the way that our governor has painted this, you would think that a whole bunch of gun-toting, crazed out, far-right, anti-government agitators showed up. And I can't believe they're saying, unmasked agitators, unmasked. Oh my goodness. That's for another day. But it's just, it's almost comical now. But what's not comical is how this turned out. So I'm going to start off. I just want to show you some video of what it looked like when they first got there. So this is the group of people before the session started. They're at the Capitol building. Now, if you look around, these aren't militia. These aren't people that are going in there toting AK or, guns on their hips, shotguns, ready to storm down the door. These are ordinary citizens just like you and me who have shown up to have their voices heard. Now, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. You can see things got a little heated at the front. There's a conversation going on. This conversation is by a gentleman saying, now hold on, guys, because what he's noticed on the door is a sign that says they're only going to let 26 of them in. And they're only going to let 26 in because they're saying they need to social distance. Which, did you see these people? Do you think any of these people are concerned about getting coronavirus from any of their fellow citizens who are also there with them? They're being told they need to social distance from each other. And the debate going on here is number one, they don't need to. They're not concerned. Let them take their own health and their own risk and let them go in. Let them go in and let them sit. They don't want to sit down on the floor, okay, with the legislature, with the House of Representatives. They said, hey, let us set up in the gallery. That's what they're. If you look at the door that they're outside the gallery, and they want to go in. They want to sit up in the top area there together and listen in on the session, hold our government accountable, which is their legal right to do so, and frankly, their civil duty as Idahoans, as American citizens. We should show up from time to time and hold our government accountable. So he's having this argument right now, but still, they're not storming in. They're simply pleading their case. Now, as we skip forward just a little bit more, because this goes on for a long period of time. I believe this is our Speaker of the House that's now telling them that they're only going to allow a certain number of them in. To which now you can see the rest of the group is getting a little bit more agitated, saying, hey, this is a bunch of bull, let us in. Eventually, they start letting people in, as you can see here, and I'm going to let you just watch what happens. What you're going to see is they're counting heads, and at about 26, I assume, because I didn't count the heads, the Idaho State police officer is instructed, that's it, we're done, and he stops them. He says, no more. We're not letting anybody in. Now the crowd's getting a little bit agitated. They're holding the door open and they're saying, whoa, hold on a minute. This is wrong. And this debate goes on for quite a while. You can see how many of them are there. Again, nobody's pulling guns out. Okay, this isn't, sure, some of them are wearing sidearms. Okay, this is Idaho. And there are different groups there. I think some of them are probably there from the 3%ers, the militia group that frankly someday we might be thankful for. Just saying. And some of the other groups, but they're not. It's not what the media painted of them, and it's not what our governor's painting of these folks. So they start having some debate. This goes on for some time, and I'm going to skip forward a little bit more, and you can see now some of them they're getting ready to push their way in. If you watch up kind of towards the front, they're finally having enough and they're starting to pull the doors open because they want to go in, and they believe they are allowed to go in. And as I'm going to show you, it is their right to go in. So that they finally get the doors open, and you heard of the door being broken open. I'm just going to go ahead and quiet down because you should hear what's going on and see this part. Okay, there's a reason that I showed that to you. Does this look like a group of people who grabbed a hold of what the media made it sound like they came in and they bashed a door in? That's not what happened at all. What happened is they were trying to pull the door open, and the police were pulling the door shut, and what probably should have been safety glass and wasn't, after this beautiful remodel they just did, the glass just shattered, and they're lucky some people didn't get hurt. But it wasn't people that, again, that were slamming into the glass and busting their way in. They were trying to get in to have their voices heard, which they're legally allowed to do. Now, eventually, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this. It's kind of quiet on the audio. I'm going to try to turn this up so you can hear it, and I'm going to let this go to a full screen. Eventually, they're allowed to go in.
Oh! What? Yeah, let the man speak.
All right. So I will open the gallery.
Thank you.
On these conditions. There's regular rules, okay? So no
There's
signs.
no conditions.
Quiet. No signs. Decorum. No yelling out. No applauding. No booing. No cheering. None of that. Just like regular gallery. Okay?
All right.
Can you do that? So you understand that if you don't,
You can be kicked out.
Remember who you are. He's talking.
The individual can be kicked out, not all. Yeah. You understand that?
You guys are going to police yourselves up there.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to act like good citizens.
Yes, sir.
That's why we're here. All right.
That's why we're
here.
That's why we're
Yeah,
here.
exactly right.
We don't have so many seats. There's no standing
There's no
We can
standing.
stand.
When the seats are gone, the seats are gone.
Obviously, social
All
distance
right?
not
So
working.
there's signs over there that are going to leave first. And then we're going to come in. And we're going to act like polite citizens, okay?
All right.
All right?
Let him in. Still a limit. That means we're
All
going to
right.
file.
Now, we will postpone the
People
action
have always been able to stand.
until then.
No, they have never been able to.
I was here 3 months ago and we
Yes, they
stood.
have.
Scott, we were acting like minors.
Good.
They're trying to get in. They barred the door
She
shut.
said let us in.
Let him in.
On the liberty of appearance to come to a public meeting.
When the seats are full, the gallery is, well, we have overflow throughout the building where you'll be able to participate that way. Just like always.
Absolutely, and everyone that didn't get a seat would be going there.
That's right.
But there's lots of seats in here that are, and they
All
try to
right,
take them
now
from us.
you see that it's roped off, okay? So I got to keep that left.
All right, I'm going to end that there and flip this back down so that I can talk. Okay, so I want some important takeaways. If you were able to hear that, first of all, he says he's going to let them come in. So they didn't storm into the full session. This group of people that you see here, and there were a lot of them that showed up to speak because there's a lot of people concerned about what's going on. And can I just point out, you see how many kids are there? These are families. These weren't people showing up for a fight. You don't bring your children in when you're showing up for a fight, when you're showing up just for some kind of an angry mob-style protest. Who would bring their kids for that? That's not what they showed up for. They showed up to have their voices heard. They brought their kids so their kids could see how government operates and should operate, and instead they got to see how absolutely government should not operate. And they showed up so their kids could see what a peaceful protest looks like. Not protest, but a peaceful what a peaceful legislative session with people going in there to speak and to exercise their rights. So again, this wasn't meant to be a protest. Protest is what you see going on elsewhere, and it's not peaceful. These people didn't show up for a fight. They showed up to have their voices heard and to see what's going on. So that's the number one thing I want to point out. But the second thing that I want to point out is that I don't know if you could hear the voices of the citizens that showed up as he was speaking and saying, okay, we're going to let you in, and there is overflow. You heard a few of them say, as always. Because there always is. This is how our government in Idaho works. This is normal. This isn't the first time some of them have been there. And they showed up and came from all over Idaho. Can you imagine driving from all over Idaho, somewhere, Idaho Falls, maybe further north, to come down to Boise to attend a regular, government function. And suddenly you're told, no, you're not coming in. We don't want you here. And I believe there's reasons they didn't want him here. And I believe those were political reasons that go beyond this coronavirus outbreak. And I'm going to show you that here in a few minutes. But he also said, you can't go in and be unruly. And they said, we didn't want to be unruly. We wanted to come in. We wanted to be peaceful. We wanted to be quiet. You can hear them talking. So that's why we came here. We came here just to be a part of the process. We didn't get angry until you told we couldn't come in. So anyhow, so you see, there's women, there's children, there's just older citizens, younger citizens. There's just a group of people who wanted to come in there and be a part. So let's move on from that. Let's talk a little bit more about why they were upset. Let's talk about the legal side of things, what the law has to say instead of what Shane has to say. So let's start with some of the Idaho meeting laws. I'm going to pull some stuff up on here on the screen. Okay. So this is the Idaho Code. It's Title 74, Transparent and Ethical Government. It's under Chapter 2, Open Meeting Laws. Governing bodies requirement for open public meetings. Except as provided below, all meetings of a governing body of a public agency shall be open to the public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting, except as otherwise provided by this act, and I will get into that a little bit later. You see, I've also got highlighted below, all meetings may be conducted using telecommunication devices which enable all members of a governing body participating in the meeting to communicate with each other. So they did this so that people that were remote wouldn't have to drive all the way in. A lot of people have busy lives. They have things they need to do, and driving for a few hours to get down to our Capitol is something that they just simply couldn't make happen. So they allowed them to be there on using Zoom meetings and such. But it says, provided, however, that at least one member of the governing body or the director of the public agency or the chief administrative officer of the public agency shall be physically present at the location designated in the meeting notice as required under 74-204 Idaho Code to ensure that the public may attend such meeting in person. Now, Idaho in 1974, they were very specific. They wanted the public to be able to attend, so much that they made it law. And it's so strict in the state of Idaho. It is with such magnitude of importance that the Office of the Attorney General puts this out. I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. So from the Office of the Attorney General, Idaho Open Meeting Law Manual. This is sent throughout the state to anyone who needs this if they're going to be having meetings that fall under this code. They want to make sure that it's abided by. So the State of Idaho Office of Attorney General, Lawrence Watson, he has a big introduction. This introduction, I blew it up just so you can see a little bit better. It says, open and honest government is fundamental to a free society. The Idaho Legislature formalized our state's commitment to open government by enacting the Idaho Open Meeting Law in 74. The Open Meeting Law codifies a simple but fundamental Idaho value. The public's business ought to be done in public. It goes on to say, those who conduct meetings must remember this policy above all when deciding whether a meeting should be open. Remember, when in doubt, open the meeting. There is no question whether or not meetings should be open. In fact, there's even this form that goes out talking about how to testify before the legislative committees. Can't talk today. But it talks about what to do before the committee meeting, how to handle yourself at the meeting, be on time, be sure to sign your name in whether you intend to testify. Sign-up sheets are available at all meetings so that you can testify. All testimony and all committee discussion must be addressed to the chairman. It goes on to explain just exactly how to do this in detail so that people can show up, people can listen, people can hold their government accountable, and people can speak. Because Idaho has always believed that our citizens have a right to be heard. So, excuse me. Yes, things did change a little bit under this coronavirus outbreak. And Governor Little addressed that. He addressed that with this proclamation here. It's from the office of the governor. And it was dated, what is this? I issued a proclamation on March 13th declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho due to the occurrence and imminent threat to the public health and safety arising from the effects of the 2019 novel coronavirus. I don't need to read in all the whereas. It's all listed out. But the important part is right here because it shows exactly what changes need to be made. Now, therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, by virtue of the authority vested in me by Section 46-1008 of the Idaho Code, and by the Constitution of the state of Idaho, do hereby find and therefore proclaim and declare 1. The Proclamation 1 issued on March 13th is hereby amended to incorporate this proclamation. The requirements of the following portion of Section 74203 Idaho Code are suspended during the term of the emergency declared in the proclamation dated March 13th, 2020, including during any extensions of the declared emergency, blah, blah, blah. So here's provided, however, here's what's changed. That at least one member of the governing body or the director of the public agency or the chief administrative officer of the public agency shall be physically present at the location designated in the meeting notice as required under Section 74204 Idaho Code to ensure that the public may attend such meeting in person. Even under the changes made during this pandemic, the governor recognized that the public has the right to attend those meetings. So there's no question. They had the right to be there. And can you start to see a little bit why they might have got just a little bit agitated when they were told that they couldn't go in? These people attend meetings. These people attend our legislative meetings. These people are used to speaking out. Some of them are activists. Some of them are just concerned families. But they all knew they had a right to be there. And the governor understands they have a right to be there. The government knows they have a right to be there, and they weren't going to let them go in. So yes, they did get a little bit agitated. So what was it that they were there for? I mean, they were awful passionate, and a lot of people showed up. It was because there was a few pieces of legislation that had them extremely concerned, as it should have. One of those was the House bill that was going to grant immunity, legal immunity, to our businesses and to our government and to our schools and to hospitals and to anyone that was acting in good faith, quote unquote, throughout this pandemic. Now, some of the concerns that they had were that immunity given to a hospital and to doctors might spur them to be a little reckless with a proposed vaccine. And rightfully so. Also, some of the wording, it said the businesses were given immunity if they practiced a good faith standard. Essentially what was happening is it was saying, if you do what I tell you to, from the governor, if you operate your business under my rules, you have immunity, and if you don't, well, then, tough on you. So it was a way of strong-arming businesses into obeying the governor's rules throughout this pandemic and throughout the shutdowns. So what power does the governor have? And this was some of the other things that they were concerned about. The governor didn't just declare that it was a disaster, but he declared martial law. And many people don't understand that. They don't know that back in March, it was March 13th that March 13th, the governor put out this declaration. Let me zoom in so we can see it here. It was Titles 46 under Militia and Military Affairs. It was Chapter 10, State Disaster Preparedness Acts. It was 46-1008. And this codifies how the governor can declare a disaster emergency and then what powers he's given. And so the powers that he's given, when he did this on the 13th, were pretty extensive. The governor may issue executive orders. Executive orders have the force and effect of law. It says that in this act. It activates the disaster response and recovery aspects of the state, local, and intergovernmental disaster emergency plans. It suspends the provisions of any regulation. He has the right to suspend the provisions of any regulations prescribing the procedures for conduct of public business that would in any way prevent, hinder, or delay necessary action in coping with the emergency. It gives him the right to utilize all resources of the state, including but not limited to those sums in the disaster emergency account as he shall deem necessary to pay obligations and expenses. He can transfer the direction, personnel, or functions of state departments or agencies. He can commandeer or utilize any private property, real or personal, he finds necessary. He can direct and compel the evacuation of all or part of the population from any stricken or threatened area in the state as he deems necessary. He can prescribe routes, modes of transportation, destinations in connection with the evacuation. He can control ingress and egress to and from a disaster area, the movement of persons within the area, and the occupancy of premise therein. Suspend or limit the sale, dispensing, or transportation of alcoholic beverages, explosives, or combustibles. He can make provisions for the availability and use of temporary emergency housing. He can enter into agreements with the federal government for the sharing of disaster recovery expenses, which we took advantage of, and we saw during this that he was able to get those emergency funds. So the governor gets a lot of leverage. He can do anything he wants to under this. But what he can't do is operate as a dictator. So the state of disaster emergency shall continue until the governor finds that the threat or danger is past, or the disaster has been dealt with to the extent that the emergency conditions no longer exist. So there is an end to his reign. And when either or both of these events occur, the governor shall terminate a state of disaster emergency by executive order or proclamation, provided, however, that no state of disaster emergency may continue for longer than 30 days. So he's only got 30 days that he can do this. However, if he finds that it should be continued for another 30 days or any part thereof, he can extend it. But the legislature still has control under 46-1008. The legislature, by concurrent resolution, may terminate a state of disaster emergency at any time. It's very important that we understand this and that we understand why. This is put in place because there is a balance of power between the governor and our legislature, and that balance of power is very important. The House has the right to appropriate money. They're the ones who control the public purse, and that's in place for a very good reason. Do we really want one person out there just spending money freely, going on a crazy spending spree? Absolutely not. That we need to have that balance of power. The people need to be able to speak through their elected representatives and say, hey, Governor, we don't agree with what you're doing, and this is how we want business conducted. We have the Senate. The Senate is another piece of the puzzle, another balance of power, just like it is in our federal government. But this wasn't good enough for Governor Little. In fact, about 2 weeks later, just 2 days more than that, he enacted this wonderful piece of legislation. Chapter 6, Martial Law. Are you seeing this? Martial law and active duty. 46-601, the authority of the governor. The governor shall have the power in the event of a state of extreme emergency to order into the active service of the state the National Guard or any part thereof, and the organized militia or any part thereof, or both as he may deem proper. State of extreme emergency means, and it goes on to explain, and within that there is an epidemic. This is the power given. Now, you notice this list is a lot smaller than the other list. You know why? He can order into the active service of the state, the National Guard, or any part thereof, and the organized militia, or any part thereof, as both as he may deem proper, which the other act that he enacted a couple weeks prior to this gave him that right, gave him those powers. But during a period of a state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area or regions wherein the state of extreme emergency exists all police power vested in the state by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Idaho. In the exercise thereof, he is authorized to promulgate, issue, and enforce rules, regulations, and orders which he considers necessary for the protection of life and property. Folks, he becomes a dictator. Nobody can stop him. In fact, you want to know when this ends? It shows it. It ends when he says it does. Whenever the state of extreme emergency has been ended by either the expiration of the period for which it was proclaimed, or the need for said state of extreme emergency has ceased, the governor shall declare the period of the state of extreme emergency to be at an end. Why, in our infinite wisdom, we ever allowed this piece of legislation to pass is beyond me. Maybe because we trusted our governors to be decent people. It wasn't good enough that he had all the necessary tools to deal with this emergency. He didn't want anybody telling him no. He didn't want anybody to bound him and control him. He didn't want to have to negotiate. He didn't want to have to work with anybody else. He gave himself ultimate power in the state of Idaho. And he's not letting it go. So what has he done with this power? Let's take a look. He's fined businesses that opened too early. You know, you opened earlier than the almighty Governor Little said you can, so we're going to fine you for trying to keep your business and your family alive. He's shut down businesses throughout the state because of his draconian measures and his infinite wisdom that he decided that King Little should put in place. 301 Idaho businesses have closed permanently, and that's just the count from Yelp. And he's gone on a spending spree. He has spent not just a few $100,000 or a couple $1,000,000. Oh, Lord, no. He threw out $122 million to support schools, okay? Now, is that a bad thing? No, but he did it without the House, and the House is supposed to be that balance of power. He spent $300 million on state cash grants to make available to the small businesses. He spent nearly $50 million. Now look at this. For broadband projects. This is CARES Act money. This is money, again, all of this money, our elected House of Representatives is supposed to have control over. They're supposed to say whether or not this money can be spent. But hey, what does somebody do when you give them just a blank check to start writing? Well, Governor Little has proved it. They go out and he's just spent and spent and spent and spent without any control in place whatsoever, without any balance of power. And do you think he wants to give that up? Absolutely not. And there's more. The Idaho Return to Work. This is probably the worst one. I'm going to give you money to go back to work. Is that a conservative value in the state of Idaho? Just to, hey, you know what? I think I'm just going to throw some money at you to go back to work. That'll make a few people happy. That sounds like, I don't know what that sounds like. It's idiotic, but hey, a lot of people were glad to get the money. A lot of people were glad to go spend it, I'm sure. But we have to give people money to go back to work and earn money? Does that sound like an Idaho conservative value? But he did it. And because he could. Because he's now the dictator. So, what does our legislature think of this? What does our Senate think of this? Well, I'll show you. Right here. Idaho lawmakers protest governor's coronavirus response. They're not happy with it. They tried to meet, 26 of our legislature tried to meet to end the governor's, rightfully so, to end his reign of terror that he's just taken on Idaho. But unfortunately, they were unable to get it done. So, and here's why. Because under Idaho law, under our Idaho Constitution, a special legislative session has to be called by the governor, and the governor gets to tell them what they're going to vote on, what they're going to discuss, what they're going to do. So that's what just happened on this last legislative session. Is the governor said, "I will call a special legislative session the week of August 24th, and I will issue a proclamation the week of the August 17th, detailing the exact issues to be considered during the special session." No, you don't get to decide what you're going to talk about, legislature. I'm going to decide what you're going to talk about because I'm the king. And what did he allow him to talk about? Well, it came out. Not a lot. He said, you're going to meet, and the only thing you're going to talk about, the extraordinary session of the legislature convened by this proclamation shall have no power to legislate on any subjects other than those specified herein. I'm going to tell you what you're going to talk about, and I'm not going to hear you. I don't have to, because I'm the king. This should concern you. And it does concern our legislature. In fact, they went ahead and okayed a resolution to end Governor Little's coronavirus emergency declaration. This was from the pressure that was put onto them. This was part of the pressure that those people who met last Monday, that's why they were there. They wanted to put that pressure on Governor, on our House to try to do something about this. So despite the fact that really it didn't hold any power, they wanted to send a message. And so they put a declaration out that said, nope, it's over. We want this over. And it was a very heavy majority that said, we want this over. And then it went to the Senate, and the Senate did this. Let's blow this up so you can actually see it. The Senate turned it down because under the Idaho Constitution, it couldn't happen. So they said, following the authority outlined in the Idaho Constitution, the Idaho Senate calls for an end of the emergency disaster declaration. So they didn't mandate it because they couldn't. They couldn't make it law, but they said, hey, we don't like what you're doing either. So we would like you to end the emergency. Please, Mr. Little, will you end the emergency disaster declaration? So it didn't hold a lot of weight, but here's what they did do. And I applaud them because they did what they could do. In the Senate Resolution number 101, they all the whereases that say whereas this, whereas that, whereas this is where they talked about the Article 2 of the Idaho Constitution states that the powers of the government of this state are divided into 3 distinct departments, the legislative, executive, and judicial, and no person or collection of persons charged with the exercise of powers properly belonging to one of these departments shall exercise any powers properly belonging to either of the others. So they basically what they said is, no, you're not supposed to be spending because that power belongs to somebody else. And they're recognizing that, and they're reminding the governor of that. They're saying that it doesn't belong to you. They went on to say, whereas the Idaho legislature, as representatives of the people of Idaho, have a constitutional right as a separate and equal branch of government to exercise the power of appropriation and the making of laws. And whereas the COVID-19 coronavirus outbreak in Idaho has resulted in an emergency response that includes the expenditure of public funds. Okay, I want to talk about that for a second. So one of the things that they also recognized and they were afraid of is that if they were able to end the governor's reign of unbridled authority by ending the emergency declaration, that they might lose millions of dollars of federal assistance during this time. And that was a valid concern. So, however, what they did is they asked the governor to end the part that gives him all authority and put into place the other emergency declaration that still gives the legislature their authority. And by still having an emergency declaration, we would still get the funding. That's what they're suggesting. And again, they can't mandate it because we kind of screwed ourselves at some point when we wrote the laws. But here's what's exciting. I want to get to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So they recognize that. It says, whereas the governor issued a proclamation dated August 19th, calling an extraordinary session of the legislature with the only subjects for considering being. So they said, hey, this is all you told us that we could do, and we recognize that you had the authority to do that. And yeah, King Little, you certainly took advantage of that. And whereas during the course of the emergency, contradictions and shortcomings in the Constitution, statutes, and rules regarding emergencies have become clear. Yeah, so we screwed up, and we recognize it. Whereas Section 9, Article 4 of the Idaho Constitution limits only the topics that the legislature may consider during the extraordinary session to only those set forth in the proclamation. And whereas 46-1008 Idaho Code states that the legislature by concurrent resolution may terminate a state of disaster emergency at any time, that conflicts with the subject limitation applicable to extraordinary sessions. So they said, okay, in one end, the Constitution, we said that only the governor can tell us what we can talk about and vote on in an extraordinary session. But then over here in 1008, it says the legislature can end it. So there's a contradiction. But where contradictions, I'll read it because it's important that they did this, and it's important to understand it. So right here, whereas when the Constitution and a statute conflict, the Constitution prevails. Whereas circumstances during the course of the declared emergency demonstrate the need for the greater ability of the legislature to respond in timely fashion to the concerns of the citizens of Idaho as they relate to the appropriate exercises of legislative authority, and whereas the Senate desires to take steps to maintain the constitutional balance of powers in times of emergencies, and whereas the Senate has considered whether terminating the emergency declaration is within the constitutional authority of the legislature during, we'll go to the next page, during this extraordinary legislative session, along with the impacts to the daily lives of Idaho's citizens, and whereas the Senate has acknowledged that any action terminating the emergency declaration would not end the orders of the local health districts and yada yada. So they continue going. But here's what I love. Be it further resolved by the Idaho Senate that in the next regular session of the Idaho Legislature, the following matters be considered for legislation. And I blew this up to make it easier to read because this is where they did the most they could, and they just basically told the governor, look, you're overstepping your authority. You can't do this, and though technically you can, you shouldn't be doing this. And as soon as we get the opportunity, we're going to make it right. And these are the steps that they're going to take in the next, or consider rather, in the next legislative session. So now therefore be it resolved by the members of the Senate assembled in the first extraordinary session of the 65th Idaho Legislature that the Senate of the state of Idaho calls on the governor to end the state of emergency, but in a manner that preserves financial support for Idaho's hospitals and nursing homes and keeps the regulatory reductions in place for Idaho citizens. Be it further resolved by the Idaho Senate that in the next regular session of the Idaho Legislature, the following matters be considered for legislation. A declaration that all Idahoans who work, provide for families, pay taxes, and otherwise contribute to the Idaho economy must be deemed essential in any declared emergency. So you don't get to pick the winners and losers. All Idaho workers are essential. An amendment to the Idaho Constitution providing that, in limited circumstances, the Idaho Legislature may call itself back into session while remaining a part-time citizen legislature. A limitation on the length of any emergency declaration of the governor without the concurrence of the legislature. A limitation on the emergency powers and spending authority of the executive branch without the approval of the legislature. a prohibition on quarantining healthy individuals, the ending of orders prohibiting Idahoans from attending places of worship, rescinding existing emergency declarations, and a review of the authority of the public health districts and local government subdivisions. And then they just went on, and I thought this was kind of cheeky and fun, but it says, be it further resolved by the Idaho Senate that all Idahoans have the right to physically participate in the elections by presenting themselves at local polling stations to cast their ballot. That's not the cheeky part. To cast their ballots. Be it further resolved that Idaho Senate reaffirms the right of all Idahoans to make health and safety decisions for themselves and their families. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Senate be and is hereby authorized and instructed to send a copy of this resolution to the governor of the state of Idaho. That's the part that I just was kind of you know what, Governor? You are exceeding your authority, and we're going to make sure this gets in your hands and that you know it. And I applaud them. A lot of people are upset that they didn't just end it. Constitutionally, they couldn't. And me being a big Constitution person, whether it be the federal Constitution or the state Constitution, we have to have a Constitution. And whether or not we like what's going on, we have to obey that Constitution. And so I personally believe they took the proper action. They took what action they could. And they're saying that we recognize we have a problem here and we are going to fix it. But there is one thing that is clear. It is clear that the vast majority of both the Idaho House of Representatives and the Idaho Senate, it's clear that they recognize that Governor Little is exceeding his constitutional authority during this pandemic, but he's doing it based on a technicality written into the law. And we have a serious problem when our governor is doing this. We have a serious problem when the citizens don't understand exactly what is taking place, which is why I'm making this video, because I want this to be shared. I want my fellow citizens in Idaho to understand exactly how bad our governor is exceeding his authority and how out of control he is and how much he desires to have that power and that it's up to him to let it go. And so here's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to contact your governor. Right now, this is sitting on his desk. Right now, he knows how the House and how the Senate feel. He knows how the people feel because they showed up to voice their concerns. I applaud those people who showed up. They should have showed up. And they should have done exactly what they did to force their way into their house. That's what they were chanting. This is our house. And it is our house. It is the citizens' house. That's where we get to go in and be a part of what's happening at the Capitol, to be a part of what's happening in our government. And they should absolutely have been there. And for the governor to come out and say what he did and to say that they were out of control, that they shouldn't be there, to just basically throw it back in their face shows just exactly what kind of a person he is. And I hope we remember this. I hope all Idaho citizens remember this next time that it comes up to vote for that governor, because they should impeach him. Okay? Let's just be clear. Any governor that will take that kind of control, and this is going to show really who he is. He has the opportunity now to do the right thing. Do you think he's going to do it? I don't know. I hope. He should do it. But in closing, I know this is probably going to hit the governor's desk. And I have a few words that I want to say directly to the governor. And it's how I'm going to end this video, and it's how I'm going to end this show. I want to say, Governor Little, you may not remember me, but you and I, we've met. Back before you were the governor, you were campaigning in Shoshone, Idaho at the Lincoln County Fair. I was working for an internet company at the time, and we had a booth set up right across the aisle from yours. And if you'll recall, it was a slow time of day, and I invited you to come over and sit with me in my booth so that I could get to know you a little bit better and ask you a few questions and kind of find out how you would act as governor if you were given the opportunity, and you accepted that invitation. If you recall, we spoke about several topics that afternoon surrounding individual liberty versus government control. And we even talked about marijuana legislation, to which you shared with me a story about your brother's struggles in life and how you felt his use of marijuana had contributed to those struggles. And we had a differing of opinion there. But at the end of the conversation, I shook your hand. And I told you these words, which I remember very well. I said, Mr. Little, you seem like a nice enough guy. But after our conversation today, I cannot in good conscience give you my vote because I fear, based on today's conversation, that when push comes to shove, you wouldn't listen to the will of the people. And instead, you would use your authority to impose your own personal beliefs over those of the citizens. Well, Mr. Little, not only have you proved my concerns correct, you have exceeded them beyond my wildest imagination. I was mostly right about you that day. However, I was wrong about one thing. After seeing how you've treated the citizens of the state of Idaho and the people who came to speak in their house, it is very clear to me that you are not a nice guy. You, sir, are a tyrant. And I don't know who it is that has your ear, but it certainly isn't the good people of the state of Idaho. And with that, I'll simply say, good day.